All right, I am live. Welcome back to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. I am your intrepid host, Robert Phoenix, and welcome to the end times. I mean, we may as well call it the way we see it, the way it is. We are really living in the end times, and it may not necessarily be biblical end times, although it might be. We are really living through the final sentences in a long and convoluted story. And well, the ending is yet to be written for the end time period that we're in. But the good thing about the end times is that there will be another epoch and another era after this time, and hopefully we'll all be there to be a part of it and occupying a more just and friendly, humane, spiritual existence and world when the madness abates. But we're going to have to go through madness, and that's just the way it is. We're witnessing it now, and I'm going to talk about some events today that are disturbing. So I'm giving you some fair warning. These are some signs and signifiers that we're living through some very perilous times. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't an upside. There's always an upside. The upside is obviously you get to go through this and you get to master your ability to live through a time like this. And you can't do it alone, although ultimately you are alone. There's the paradox. You can't do it alone. You have people in your life, you have your family, your tribe, your network, and you have God, the Most High, the thing that you connect with, right? That is here to help you and each and every one of us as we learn about ourselves in a very multidimensional fashion, and bringing the spirit to the meat suit. Okay, here we go. Let's see who we have in the house. We have Michael Pafford. Hello, Michael. I'll reach out to you and your new pal sometime today. Good to see you. Miranda Couch in the house. Beth Berry, nice to see you. There's Susan from Overcast, Arizona. Do you remember that song, Arizona Skies? Who is that by? Is that by China Crisis? The Arizona Skies. Anyway. Scrubbies, what's happening, Tamara? Good to see you. DJ MC in the house. What's going on, Michael? Yes, it is going to be very cold this week. The polar river is going to descend upon North America. That's another term for the Rothschild's weather machine. They've been spraying chemtrails like crazy the last couple of weeks. I find it hilarious that YouTube has yet to remind everyone that Joe Biden is the president of the U.S. Is anyone still getting that announcement under the show? Has to remind you, yeah. Drill it down. Hey, Michael, feel much better. Sort of that there is a banner. Joe Biden is a president. Yeah. Well, did they have to remind us? Repetition is the mother of mastery or some bullshit like that. Let's see. What else do we have here? There's Natasha. Speaking of cold, up there on the porch of the world. What's going on, Natasha? VV. Good morning from chilly WNC. There's my man Thor at the door. Good morning from sunny Orlando. It's pretty sunny here. It's a little chilly. I'm doing this new thing where I'm walking barefoot on my dew-dripped grass in the morning, trying to connect up with the earth energy. If I catch it right, I can get that earth energy, and I can look into the sun just over the sort of northeastern corner of my yard. So the new daily practice. Let's see. Oh, your electric. So our friend here, Scrubby's Tamara, lives in a very interesting kind of place. She's a true member of the underground. So her hearth and her home are naturally insulated. Let's put it that way. Carissa Pollock. Hello, Carissa. Good to see you. There's Lil's my man. Masaki, who is psychically driving the price of Dogecoin single-handedly. They don't know what you're doing with your secret technologies, Masaki. All these Doge tards should be cut. They should be cutting you in on their Doge trove. We know what's going on with you. Let's see, Susie Escobar. What's going on, Susie? Bad story from Sacramento. I have to talk about it today. Very bad story from Sacramento. The lovely, intelligent Jonas. There she is. Laurel Jubin. What's going on, Laurel? Good to see you. Carolina in the Pines. Hello. Elizabeth W. Rabbit. JMP Love. What's going on, Jacqueline? MK is here. Let's see. Misty Minor. What's going on, Misty? Is the new edition here yet? I don't think so. You're getting close, aren't you? By the way, our good friend Steve, Papa Steve, and Mama Kate are doing really well with their new edition as well. So just loving the domestic life and moving into parenthood for the very first time, which is quite an important experience and one that is really underrated. And it changes lives. Having a kid changes lives. Let's see, who do we have here? In a good way. Good way. EC 2189 Kaku checking in. Ian Barber. Do you remember when, you guys probably don't remember this, the Little Rascals, when Alfalfa would sing The Barber of Seville? Oh, that's classic. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Cheeky Monkey, what's going on, Amy? Kurt Judkins. Good to see you, Kurt. Debisu. Hello, Debisu. There's Renee. Hello, Renee. Good morning. Gucci to go. It's a fantastic show. Well, good. I'm glad you liked it. I was out of it. I have to tell you, like, by the time last night's show was over, I was like, it was because I'm still kind of recovering from the Friday thing. I'm still not 100%. So last night's show, by the time I was done, I was pretty done. Let's see. Thank you. Appreciate that. Mary Grether in the house. What's going on? My man, Uncle Glenn, Alabama Barbie. I love that name. Double V. What's going on, Double V? We got VV and we have Victoria V. We got a lot of Gemini energy going on here in this chat. The reflection, the world of reflection. Palindrome Day. Speaking of palindrome, antipode. There's my antipodal brother, Mr. Mark Matheny. What's going on, Mark? Good to see you. Let's see, who else do we have? Can we hope we can look at Thomas Sowell and Black Conservative Patriots? Thomas Sowell is the man. It's amazing. He's still around and he's still viable. Yeah, he's Thomas Sowell. He's old school. You know, this guy was a student of Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman, a major force in economics in the 20th century. We are not living in Milton Friedman's universe, by the way. We have shifted universes. And Thomas Sowell is still one of the most respected voices. And he's a giant. I mean, he comes from a period of these gigantic figures. I mean, Milton Friedman's an interesting character because he was a member of the CFR. Milton Friedman was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And at the same time, he single-handedly was driving this idea of economic and social freedom. And whether or not you buy it or not, that's up to you. But he was always consistent with his message, and his explanations of his economic theory were so down to earth that most people could understand what he was talking about because he linked it to social issues. And he was under a lot of attack during the 1970s. And the 1970s was their first kind of woke 1.0. And Milton Friedman was very instrumental in essentially turning the economy of Chile around. And the story of Chile is like really interesting with Pinochet and Allende, and there's like a major overthrow that takes place there. And the United States government was clearly involved in the overthrow of Mr. Allende and Pinochet, who was a dictator. And sometimes I hate to say this, but sometimes you have to have dictators in order to have a regime change. I mean, and I don't think Trump was a dictator, by the way. I think Trump was, in fact, very far from being a dictator. Trump had the language at times of appearing to be like a dictator, but his policy was anything but dictatorial. If anything, he was a middle-of-the-road Republican who caved into a lot of left and democratic demands. So Pinochet essentially works with a group of young economic students who went to college they were no longer students at that time. They were professional economists, and they were living in Chile. And under Allende, which was essentially communism, everything went to shit. This is the thing with communism. They always have food shortages. There's always strikes. There's always, just these vile social conditions. Absolutely vile. And they make people into these just utter lackeys of dependency. And they were rife. I mean, people weren't digging it. Chile was rife for an overthrow. So these economists who had studied under Milton Friedman at the University of Chicago, once Pinochet was in power, they brought Milton Friedman down to Chile to give a talk with Friedman, basically saying, look, if I'm going to go, I get to say anything I want. And they said, oh, okay. Knowing that Pinochet was just, a little more than temperamental when it came to people upsetting the apple cart in Chile. But what Friedman did is he put things in motion. And he got people in Chile to think about the economy in a different way. More importantly, he got Pinochet to think about the economy in a different way. And then they made this radical shift to more free market capitalism. And initially, it's always painful initially. When you go from one system to another, it's very painful because you have to basically detox the prior system. And there's an economic detox that took place. So there was some hardship in the beginning, but eventually they got their economy, back on their feet. And the Chilean economy in the 90s and the 2000s, I don't know where it is now. It seems to be that Chile is kind of back under the shackles of the NWO and the World Bank and all that shit. But during the 90s and the 2000s and even the 2010s, the economy in Chile was pretty good. They moved to a very much more capital aggressive and free market standard. And the Chilean wine industry exploded, absolutely exploded during that time. We started to get all these great wines from Chile here in the United States. And Chile produces a lot of food, especially during the winter months for North America. So Friedman wound up changing the economy of Chile. He also wound up changing the economy of Estonia after the fall of the wall. And Estonia went on to become one of the great examples of free market capitalism and manufacturing inside of Estonia, not outsourcing. So Thomas Sowell was a student of Milton Friedman's. That's the connection between Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell. And in a lot of ways, they come out of the Austrian school of von Mises and the libertarians, which, have their own issues. Libertarians have their own issues. It's not a perfect, there's no perfect system. There is no perfect system. There are systems that are less egregious than others. And that's what we have to kind of wrap our heads around. Hey, what's going on? Lynn, good to see you. I'm 39 weeks today, still holding out. Well, congratulations. Oswald Spengler, happy St. Brigid's Day, aka Imbolc. Today's Imbolc. Casey and Lex, what's going on from Annapolis? Very near the heart of the beast. I see you have U.S. elections warning. You're delightfully dangerous. Yeah, I guess they've targeted us. Dissidents. Let's see. Soldier of Fortune in the house. Who do we have here? This is baby number 5. Wow. So you're an old hand. That's great. Congratulations. Rennie, what's going on, Renstar? Good to see you. Benjamin Hunt in the house. We got Half Q. Hello, Half Q. Tessa D, what's going on? Tessa Dick, hey, libertarians, you either believe in government or you don't. Can't have it both. Jan Augenstein. Hello, Jan. Good to see you. Diana Young. Hey, there's the Techno Brat. What's going on, Emily? What's happening, Emily? So I think we've got a quorum here. Chile fared much better than the rest of South America. I dated a Chilean guy for 6 years. His family always said Pinochet was a necessary evil. This is what people don't understand. People don't understand that at times, I hate to say this, but you need a very strong, well, in the past you have. In the past, you need a very strong central figure in order to kind of right the wrongs of the previous regime, which in many cases tends to be either socialistic or communistic. We've seen this, and I'm not here to sing the praises of Mussolini and fascism, but clearly Mussolini was a response to the rise of socialism and the rise of communism. We talked about this last night with Antonio Gramsci. Same thing happened in Spain with Franco, and we had there was the Spanish Civil War, and the Spanish Civil War had to do with communists. They were communist socialists, and they were trying to flip the government of Spain. And that's what the Spanish Civil War was. And again, it was kind of glamorized. Hemingway was there, and Hemingway was there as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross. He didn't fight. But we saw that there were these socialist forces that would try to gather. They were trying to gather momentum after the Bolshevik Revolution, and then take their ideology into Western Europe, and then try to overthrow these governments. And again, you had to have these characters who were these strong men who had to essentially do dirty shit. They did it in Argentina too. Again, when the communists were trying to overthrow Argentina, I mean, you had the disappeared. And this is what people, and again, I'm not here promoting this, but you have to understand that this is a dirty fucking game that these people are involved with. A dirty game. And you can see just what happened here during the election or the selection. It's a dirty game. And the only way that you can theoretically deal with people at that level is to play just as dirty, and if not more. I'm sorry to say that's the truth, and it may sound you know, sociopathic or psychopathic. Look, I'm not making up the rules. I'm just telling you, it is dog eat fucking dog. Okay, in that world, and the only way that those people understand it is when you push back twice as hard or three times as hard, and you begin to, you know, do whatever needs to be done in order to stop the encroachment of the beast. And it has not happened in this country at all. And Trump was never ever going to be that person. Never going to be that person. He was never going. Trump was too compromised. Now he did start something else. He did start this zeitgeist, which is still happening, by the way. But he was never going to be that guy. Too compromised. And I'll get into some of that. All right. Why don't we have our invocation here? Let's set the space, shall we? All right. Dear Blessed Holy Mother, Father God, of the great central sun, which is the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, and all the great avatars who have come here to walk this path of truth, freedom, and love, which, by the way, those things are not, I have to say, those things are not romantic notions. They're actually very, at times, difficult paths to walk. We ask that only the highest and best information, wisdom, and truth come through this channel for everyone at this time and through this day, that may our walks and our paths be blessed with the Most High. As we do so, we affirm and decree the qualities of strength and fortitude and endurance and courage and patience and persistence, humor and empathy and compassion, multidimensionality, creativity, imagination, novelty, and above all, love. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed from this stream. Okay, let's go. So one of the first things I wanted to drop into is I want to look at the Stop the Steal shit show. Patrick Byrne, and I'm not sure how I feel about Patrick Byrne. It's always interesting how people kind of show up at the scene of the crime and all of a sudden become sort of well known. You know, they insert themselves into the narrative, and Patrick Byrne is the former CEO of Overstock, and he basically comes out and says, "Hey, look, I was part of a sting operation that was contacted by the FBI, and we were going to sting Hillary Clinton and blah, 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 blah." So all of a sudden, Patrick Byrne has credibility. It's like, oh, wow, okay. I really hadn't paid that much attention to Patrick Byrne, although his name had popped up a few times over the past year or so as somebody who was mildly interesting. And then all of a sudden he shows up during the Stop the Steal. And now he apparently he's been doing this for a while. It just hasn't been on my radar. But he was part of that team that was Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, Michael Flynn, Rudy Giuliani, and John Ellis. There's your players. It was interesting because Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch was in there for a while, and all of a sudden you just didn't hear anything about Tom Fitton. It's like, where did he go? That guy was pretty well versed in stuff. And you have to also wonder why, like, Trump didn't have Jonathan Turley on the legal team. Like, that guy would have been good. Where was Dershowitz? Where was Alan Dershowitz? Trump's, big time lawyer. Where was he? Would you want to have Alan Dershowitz Theoretically, I wouldn't. I don't like Alan Dershowitz. I think he's a scumbag. But if you were Trump, would you want that guy on your team? This guy who is supposedly a really great track record, could basically get a wife murderer off. Would you want that guy instead of Rudy fucking Giuliani, the guy who knows where all the bodies are buried in New York City with 9/11? So Patrick Byrne fancies himself a journalist. I have a hard time reading his writing. I can't figure out whether it's actually good or really hackneyed. I'm leaning toward hackneyed. He considers himself to be a journalist, and he puts a lot of work into his work. I mean, when he writes, he's writing fucking 5,000 words, 6,000 words, 7,000 words. These are very long exposés, missives. So I'm going to show you a post that he did, and it gets into the backstory of the circus of the Stop the Steal effort. So the title here is How DJT Lost the White House, Chapter 1 by Patrick Byrne. Now, I'm just going to scroll down because I'm not going to read the whole thing. I would be here till noon. And his writing style is a bit convoluted. It's kind of interesting. It's anecdotal. It's conversational. And at the same time, it's kind of hard to work through in some ways. Like, he could say what he wants to say with about half of this text. But it's not just text. There's a lot of other things here. There's illustrations, images, there's graphs, there's all kinds of stuff, right? So what is he saying here? What he's saying is that Rudy Giuliani, here, I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs, and this will give you some idea as to what was going on. So this is his disclaimer about Sidney Powell. He likes Sidney Powell. Let me just cut to the chase there. Thinks that she's the real deal. Okay, and now she's his lawyer. Mayor Giuliani, however, never became my lawyer, and I will not be so constrained in my accounts as my ultimate purpose. My only real purpose is deliver to the public as honest a rendering as I may construct of the events between November 3rd and January 6th. It seems like a historically worthy thing to do. For my part, though, they thought of me as an entrepreneur. I introduced myself to them as the proprietor of this website, deepcapture.com. I pointed out that back in 2008, it had won numerous awards for its business investigative journalism, and it had also been voted the best journalism regarding corruption. See, again, this sentence is terrible. It had also been voted the best journalism regarding corruption within the United States. Oh, like that sentence doesn't really reflect that. I may have done other things in my life, but in addition, I'm a journalist and I have the rights any journalist has. Again, the writing is hackneyed. Why do you have to qualify yourself anyway? This means I can investigate what I want to investigate. I don't have to reveal how I learn things. If I feel like sharing some of my findings with lawyers like Sidney and Rudy, it's no different than the dozens of other times this website has investigated things and shared its findings with lawyers or even with law enforcement. Okay. So he's setting the stage here. So he likes Sidney Powell. I found her sitting nearly all by herself, perhaps an assistant and junior lawyer with her in a nearly empty space on one side of the office building. She was well-informed and open-minded. When I arrived, the air had the strange tingle it has when people have just had words. We quickly got to business, and it became clear that she was on top of things. She was in touch with people from the earliest days of the creation of these systems. And soon she showed me that her information covered a portion of the narrative about which we had some knowledge, but not much, mostly concerning the origin of the machines and the reason for certain design flaws. On the other hand, as we ran through what my side of the table had already teased out of the data in the 3 days since the election, she showed me she understood what we were saying, and we quickly tied things together into what she already knew. It was a highly productive first conversation, and she ended it by telling me that I needed to go to the other side of the office, find Rudy, and immediately tell him everything I just shared with her. So they're sharing a space with Rudy Giuliani. So my cyber buddy and I went to the other side of the office building, to Rudy's side, which I understood to be the center of gravity of the operation. I should explain what I expected to find. I expected to find a command post staffed by lawyers and quants. The quants would be doing the statistical work, driving answers that would feed lawyers through being notified of the research into such irregularities as I've walked through previously, and would be availing themselves of whatever remedies the law surely provided. I figured there would be a war board with the states in question, having boxed out all relevant data, progress, and to-dos. There would be an information loop, obviously, such that the campaign headquarters in each state would be on a daily conference call to receive updates on progress, thinking that may be a fair bit for one 76-year-old gentleman to manage. I imagine Rudy might have some strong COO, perhaps a lawyer, or perhaps an executive who might be keeping assignments on track. What I found is this: the place was 20% empty. Another 30% were packing out their desks. One conference room held a large number of lawyers around a table. At least 3 of them were good. These lawyers were the mules of the operation. They were each assigned 1 or more states, yet there were things going on at the state level or below, bubbling up organically, and lawyers jumping in, filing actions. I came to learn that between Rudy's legal team and the campaign staff, there was zero communication. Think about that. Zero communication. Even though they jointly occupied 2/3 of an office story, and between the campaign staff and the activities of those local groups and their lawyers, there was also zero communication. I did not know if this was for a legal reason or just the way they operated. In time, I came to realize the latter. The mediocrity. I'm not going to be mean about it. For example, I'm not going to reveal the gender or other details about this person, other than to say, imagine a person who was a lawyer who'd once made her career at one of the better-known government agencies, but given how the mediocrity went out of the way to be horrible to work with, and because of how stunningly destructive mediocrity's behavior was, I am simply to refer to this person as mediocrity. I think the mediocrity is probably Jenna Ellis. The commish. Think of Mike from Breaking Bad, the quintessential cop. I believe this is Bernard Carrick. Tough, correct, and courteous, but stays poker-faced and dead-eyed at all times, sits in meetings with his hand casually covering his mouth, saying nothing. He even looks like Bernard Carrick a little bit. When asked something, might open his mouth, and if he does, he invariably has something highly intelligent to say, making one wonder, why does he work so hard to keep his opinion to himself? The mayor, Rudy Giuliani. I was in the hospital in New York for blah, blah, blah. He gets into his backstory with Rudy. Okay. All right. So "12 years later, on a Friday afternoon, about 3 p.m., I walked into the office space that was being shared by the Trump campaign and by the law firm that was forming up around Rudy Giuliani to investigate, address, and challenge the election irregularities which were surfacing from the 2020 election. It was nothing like the outfit I expected to find, explained above, with data gathering, feeding decision. Okay, blah, 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 blah. We know that. People wandered vaguely from meeting to meeting. The meetings I saw were run like bull sessions with no agenda, no format, and no apparent sense of urgency. Within about 45 minutes, I was ushered to a room where I was to have 30 minutes with Rudy. Physically, he was more of a grandfather than I remembered. Less robust, a bit more hunched, and a bit more irascible. I explained to him carefully the outline of what we understood at that point, an outline such as the reader might have after watching this presentation by the MIT math PhD Dr. Shiva, or the exposition by Seth Keshel, as well as the cascade of stories regarding poor security and election software, all referenced above. I feared overwhelming him, so I tried to simplify as I spoke. He occasionally grunted stoically. It was difficult to judge what was sinking in. Yet, after only 10 minutes, I saw Rudy checking his multiple phones for texts right in front of me as we sat together conversing with one of his assistants, sending someone on a side errand, or receiving a report back. It felt rather strange to be talking to a man who's paying so little attention, but the commish sitting on the side motioned for me to continue. After no more than 30 minutes, I was ushered out of the office, but told to hang around. Eventually, I was brought back into a smaller room with Mayor Giuliani and again asked to explain what I think happened, realizing I may have overwhelmed him with my earlier explanation and had gotten him lost in the forest for the trees. I broke it down simply and slowly, like one would for one's 76-year-old grandfather. Again, within 5 to 10 minutes, he was fidgeting, grunting on occasion, sending people on unrelated side errands, checking his multiple phones for texts, and typing people's responses. Meanwhile, I tried to stay on track, yet there was a moment 15 minutes in where I got a whiff of something in that small office. Medicine, ? Booze, ? Just as I was taking a sniff to determine, someone rushed in with some unrelated issue, and I was escorted from the office. Again, I wandered around among the staff, most of whom were professing to know nothing about what was going on, and many others of whom were packing up their desks into bankers' boxes. I was perplexed and found myself drifting around the convoluted office space. 30 minutes later, I was strolling outside some other conference room down the hall when I heard Rudy's familiar voice saying, "Don't understand a goddamn thing this guy's saying." Drifting out of a doorway, startled, I looked around the corner, and there was Rudy talking to whatever group of staffers happened to be sitting worshipfully in that conference room to which he had moved. Several staffers pulled me aside in a hallway. What Mayor Giuliani is going to need, one told me, is a one-page summary, very simplified, a one-pager. Another added, but with graphs and data. Another piped up and with bullet points. The mayor likes bullet points, but no more than one page, repeated the first. At the risk of sounding snobbish, I was insulted at mediocrity and these 20-something staffers giving me advice on how to write. And such asinine advice at that. I promised I would get them something by the end of the week. In 48 hours, I requested one favor. Any other requests that came from them should be orchestrated through one of their people who would call one person with whom I would designate among my colleagues. And that way we would have structure and keep track of deliverables as we sought to accommodate their needs so it would not all turn into a shit show. Then I left and drove back to DC. By late that evening, I had learned that there were different open requests from different people on Rudy's team to various of my colleagues. So they're already breaking sort of this rule. One of Rudy's people was only going to handle passing requests of this type. One only wanted to handle passing requests of that type. And the shit show began. So they didn't listen to him. I do not want to claim that everybody in that large melting office space was incompetent. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I'm going to move ahead. From occasional contacts with several of those staffers over the weeks that followed, I learned what had happened on that day just before I arrived. Rudy had declared you could never prove election fraud in the courtroom, and it insisted that it was not going to be part of their legal strategy. The strategy was going to be challenged things on procedural grounds. This county in this state had one set of rules. The other county in the same state had used a different set of rules. That violates Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So I was correct. Just before I arrived, there had been a huge blow-up between Rudy and Sidney Powell in front of everyone, ending with Rudy shouting at Sidney and sending her away in front of an office of dozens of people, declaring that none of this was going to be about election fraud and putting his mule lawyers to work on procedural filings. So there's a breach in their strategy. And Rudy he's the fading alpha here. So I'm going to continue to kind of read through some of this. That Friday afternoon, November 6th, just days after the election, I had in fact stumbled in on Sydney just as she was recovering from that exchange, and Sydney had sent me to talk to Rudy because she needs someone else to explain what she herself was herself just realizing a new form of election fraud might have emerged that was not about hundreds of dead people voting in some city, or was about the possibility of several hundreds of thousands of votes being injected into certain key locations. Rudy had just not been processing any of it from her, and probably did no better from me. And that was why he kept trying to walk away or talk with me about how Joe Frazier, 1944 to 2011, still voting in Philadelphia. Okay, so I'm gonna go forward. I'm gonna move ahead. Sunday evening, I got a phone call at 11 p.m. telling me Mayor Giuliani and his entourage were dining in such and such at a Georgetown restaurant. And would I mind bringing what I'd written over to them? I got dressed and went, but when I arrived, his security told me to sit in the bar and wait. I did for 45 minutes. This is at 11 p.m., okay? But when I arrived, I sat until 45 minutes until someone came out of the mayor's private dining room to tell me the mayor asked that I not come back to his table. Security was concerned about me for some reason, but asked me to simply send into the private dining room the paper I had written. I sent it in, then left. Later, two people in that room told me what happened when my paper arrived. First, in the 90 minutes between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m., Mayor Giuliani imbibed 3 triple scotches on ice. That's 9 shots of alcohol. Those relating the story could not vouch for what he had drunk before 11:30. Second, in front of everyone, Rudy took my paper and read it for perhaps 45 seconds, then put it aside, saying, "I'll get to this later." Third, the mediocrity was at the table. The mediocrity picked up the one-pager Rudy had sat down and, holding it between fingers like it was a turd, announced with a laugh, "Can you believe Byrne worked all weekend and this is all he wrote?" That's what they asked. They asked for a one-pager. He was being gaslit. 9 hours later, Monday morning at 10 a.m., Rudy Giuliani took the stage at a joint press conference held with Sidney Powell and Jenna Ellison. Now, he says Jenna Ellison here. This is the first time he says Jenna Ellison. Now, you notice he doesn't say the mediocrity. He can't. But I believe this is who he's talking about. Rudy was meant to give a synopsis of where things stood and then introduce Sidney Powell, who was going to discuss the possibility of mass election fraud on a scale no one is yet comprehending. That it was not about a couple of hundred dead people voting here or a few hundred people who had moved away there, but about something deeper, systemic, unprecedented. Instead of sticking to the plan, Rudy Giuliani got carried away and huffed and puffed his way around the stage for 40 minutes about how many hundreds of dead people had voted here and how illegal people had voted there, and Joe Frazier still voted, as he worked himself up like grandpa, repeating all the same points he'd been making for days. Hair dye ran down both sides of his face unnoticed. 9 hours later, he had been 9 shots of whiskey in under 90 minutes. Another story that came to me from those times with Rudy's office, one Pennsylvania lawyer, a female, had taken on the job of a filing in Pennsylvania. She received a message from opposing Kirkland and Ellis counsel that was so threatening, so unprofessional, that Kirkland later had to withdraw from the case. Insert clip. Shaken, the female Pennsylvania lawyer turned in a draft filing. So this is, okay, one Pennsylvania lawyer, a female, who had taken on the job of filing in Pennsylvania. So Kirkland and Ellis, that's the opposing counsel. Like, that's who they're dealing with in Pennsylvania. The female Pennsylvania lawyer turned in a draft filing but withdrew her representation. Rudy had to find a firm overnight that would finish the Pennsylvania filing. He finally found a lawyer in Texas. You remember when they removed their representation from Pennsylvania? I do. He finally found a lawyer in Texas with election experience who finished it and got it filed in Pennsylvania. It made no mention of election fraud and was instead focused on the procedural equal protection arguments. Rudy only read it on his way to traveling to the Pennsylvania court where he was to defend it. Upon reading it, he apparently told his companions, "This is the worst piece of shit filing I've ever had to stand up in a courtroom and defend." He went to that Pennsylvania courtroom and was destroyed. Somewhere in that interaction in the courthouse, the judge said, "But you are not alleging election fraud?" ? And Rudy said, "That's right, Your Honor, we are not." We got a call from Rudy's team that we needed to have a set of computer forensic specialists down in Georgia in the following morning. They would be provided access to a set of voting machines they could exploit. The licensed and certified computer forensics people in question demanded answers such as, where are the machines? What kind of machines are they? Tampering and playing around with election equipment being a federal felony. Under what legal authority will we be operating? Will there be law enforcement there to review and document all actions taken for any chain of evidence questions that might later arise? The response to Rudy's team was, "We've got all that covered. Get down there to Georgia, stat." With misgivings, I caused the requisite people to fly into Georgia from various locations. They were driven to some precinct where it turned out someone had previously indeed vaguely promised that access would be given to some machines. But that person was not there that day or had changed his mind. The Dolphin is like his software geeks. The Dolphin speakers sat around most of the day. They were driven to another precinct where this time they were told there was someone with a court order granted them access to certain machines. No such person was there, but a group of hostile county employees was. Again, they sat around waiting for Rudy's lawyers to arrange legal paperwork, but nothing arrived. After hours of waiting in the parking lot in the early evening, they drove away, and as they sat at a traffic light a half mile down the street, they saw 17 police cars, light bars flashing, go rolling by to the building they had just left. My cyber buddies quickly and safely returned to their respective homes. Over the next month and a half, my colleagues interacted with Rudy from time to time. Afternoons and evenings and weekends nearly all mentioned two things: the inordinate amount of attention he was paying to his daily podcast, and second, his drinking. His own staffers were mentioning it to us. Something was clear to all of us around him. Almost every evening and many early afternoons, Rudy was shit-faced. That and his podcast were the only guarantees in Rudy's life. This is not good, people. This is not good. Now here Flynn comes onto the scene. He and Flynn are, they're simpatico. So he has an alliance with Sidney Powell and Flynn. He does not have an alliance with Giuliani. And Giuliani, it's clear, was completely incapable of stopping the steal. He was completely and utterly incapable. Now, was that by... Did he consciously know that that's what he was doing? Was that his role? Was he there to cover up the steal, just like he was there to cover up for fucking 9/11? Was that what was going on? So now, again, they're demanding that Patrick Byrne send his people to Michigan. And the mediocrity, whom I believe is Jenna Ellis, is demanding that they get there. And he calls the mediocrity out. And then the mediocrity breaks down. In my astonishment, I began to respond. In my further astonishment, mediocrity began speaking over me. "I'm telling you where you need your team to be if you can't handle it." So he gets into this trick of speaking over the mediocrity, which is not some great trick, whatever. At which point I politely said, "Where the fuck do you get off? We don't work for you. We're volunteers here offering to help you do things You have no clue how to do. Go find someone else anytime you want. The way you folks work in this city is astonishing. If you ever try to work at a modern company like Google or Facebook, your ass will be fired in a New York minute. You suck. I surprised myself because I do not normally speak that way to people, but I did at that time. Perhaps it was 3 weeks of frustration boiling over. I told mediocrity that conversations with mediocrity were constant games of narcissist deflection, how amateurish mediocrity was, how anyone walking around saying either you do this or I find someone who will, and failure is not an option, is a mediocrity who may have learned management within government, but who, if ever moved to the private sector, would get fired by noon. When making such requests of my colleagues, any competent person would provide relevant information, fill them in on the mission, let them brainstorm, they'll likely be able to contribute. I saw mediocrity was crestfallen, and realizing I had overdone it, I gently escorted mediocrity away from the table. You don't do that to a guy. You don't do that to a man. You do it, basically, this is what you would do to a woman. I'm sorry, you would do it to a woman. Because most men would kind of be standoffish and resent it. I tried to smooth things over, but this is why I think it's Jenna Ellis. And I looked at Jenna Ellis's record, and I looked at her. This person's mediocre. That was the words out of my mouth. I said, this person is meaty fucking ochre. I said that on one of the podcasts that I did. It's like, who is this person? They're totally mediocre. This is not the best of breed. As we parted, mediocrity turned to me and said, let's see, don't worry, I'll be with the president. I'll make sure you'll get full credit for all this. Exasperated, I returned to my seat and friends. Minutes later, we saw that mediocrity had in fact been part of a larger party. Don't worry, I'll be with the president. I'll make sure you get full credit for all this. So she's like, okay, it's a she. I think it's Jenna Ellis. Exasperated, I returned to my seat and friends. Minutes later, we saw that mediocrity had in fact been part of a larger party, and walking out with that party was none other than Mayor Giuliani. I quickly saddled up to him on the other side. It was about 10:30 p.m. His step seemed unsteady, and I went to his elbow like one would escorting an unsteady grandpa to his taxi. We tried speaking, but whatever he was saying was indistinct to me. Finally, I told him, sir, this is not working out well with your colleagues. May I respectfully request a way that I might contact you directly so we can keep things on better track? The mayor pulled out a cell phone and had me take his number. In that weeks that followed, again, that's terrible writing. This guy's a journalist? I don't know. Speaking of mediocre. In that weeks that followed, I called and texted that number on at least half a dozen occasions. Not once did Mayor Giuliani ever respond to me. So this is the last paragraph I'm going to read, and I'm going to bail out of this story. Over these weeks, there were a number of excellent White House staffers whom I got to know, smart young men and women in their late 20s. Generally, some, but not all, were Trump enthusiasts. They filled me in on details here and there, snippets of what was happening behind the scenes among the campaign, Rudy, and the White House. One evening, once we were close enough, I let down my hair and said, this is a shit show. Is this normal? One of the staffers, and mind you, a highly pro-Trump one, said, this is it. This is the Trump White House. This is how everything has run for 4 years. So there we go. The behind the scenes look at the Stop the Steal effort. There it is. Does that surprise any of you? Any of you at all? You know, when it was all happening, it was happening very quickly. And I was trying to really understand what was going on and who was doing what. And once they denounced Sidney Powell, that Sidney Powell was not part of the team. I was like, oh, okay, we have issues here. And even Trump came out and basically said, this is who the team is in a tweet. And Sidney Powell's name was not on it. Now, no matter what you think of Sidney Powell, and there are people who think that Sidney Powell is another fraud, another, mediocrity. She did manage to ultimately clear Michael Flynn. She cleared him, which is obviously something that Rudy Giuliani was not able to do. The Stop the Steal was doomed from the start. And it was doomed even before the start, because they knew in 2018, that there was election irregularities. It happened. We saw it. There were elections that were being stolen in 2018. California was ballot harvesting. It was happening. There were people who were very lucky to get in 2018. Rick DeSantis was very lucky. Very, very lucky. Andrew Gillum almost beat him. And Gillum wound up going on a fucking crack bender after the election. Ted Cruz won by 1% of the vote. 1%. Beto O'Rourke nearly beat Ted Cruz in Texas. And by the way, Beto O'Rourke's campaign manager wound up being Joe Biden's campaign manager. When she became Joe Biden's campaign manager, I knew that Trump was in trouble. I knew that the Trump campaign was in trouble, because this is a person who took a buffoon, an absolute fucking buffoon, and got him within 1 percentage point of beating Beto O'Rourke. 2018 is when Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib all come onto the scene. For all intents and purposes, that should have been a red wave. And guess what? It wasn't. There were elections that were looking really, really good. Really, really good. The numbers were there, and then all of a sudden the numbers evaporated, just like they evaporated in the 2020 election overnight. So you have to ask yourself now, was Trump's heart really in this? Oh, by the way, another thing that piece talks about is how Trump's kids were nowhere. They were nowhere around any of this. It was not a family affair. DJT Jr., nowhere to be found. The brilliant fucking Ivanka and Jared Kushner, nowhere to be found. Eric, nowhere to be found. And it goes into even stranger territory when you take into account you've got this woman who managed to get it was a Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas Eve invitation to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump and talk about Leonardo, and who was brought there, vis-a-vis her connections with Marla Maples and Tiffany Trump. Like, this woman is bringing this information to Trump on Christmas Eve. And they're like, oh, gee, wow, this is important. Thank you. At the end of the day, I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it. His heart was not in it. And I think he knew he was going to lose. And he went out and he campaigned and he did everything he could. He did everything in his power to fulfill his commitments. And in retrospect, it was like it was a farewell tour. I mean, those campaign stops were like a farewell tour. And he even said, there was a time during the lockdown where he said, it's been my pleasure to serve you. It's like he knew. Trump knew that he was on his way out. He knew it. He absolutely knew it. And I said that he would have to win by a super landslide in order to even have a chance. And he did. And he did have a chance because they had to go through such colossal efforts, titanic efforts, in order to fucking steal the election. And it was all out there. And even with that, they couldn't prove it. And now I know a lot of people are thinking, okay, there's a parallel government going on. It's being run out of the Winter White House. Look, for your sake, I hope that's true. I moved off that train a long time ago. And quite honestly, I don't really know who's running the country right now. I don't think it's Biden. That much is clear. It is not Biden. And I'm not sure it's the military either. If anything, we might be under some form of United Nations martial law. That's my take. And let me show you guys something here. This is something that crossed my path today. Let me see if I can find this thing. Okay, I got to go back here. Give me 1 second. I had the link all set up. Let's see. Now look at now. Here we go. This is the knives just keep going into the back of DJT. Now listen, Trump has a lot of flaws. He has a lot of flaws. I don't think he used his office to the best of his ability. I think sort of organically, he did things that were interesting through his contrarian personality and through his kind of astrological coordinates with that Sun-Uranus conjunction. He gave birth to something else, which was always what it was about. It was never about Trump. But again, look at... and by the way, I never liked Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, President Trump, was both reckless and irresponsible and did not prove election fraud in any court. Now, Ted Cruz is having to do his mea culpa. This is from January 25th, the 2021 episode of Verdict with Ted Cruz. So I guess this is some stupid fucking podcast he's doing now. So there you go. And you know what? The way that it was set up, now he's saying he was reckless and irresponsible because he's trying to cover his ass from what happened at the Capitol. But I just showed you that the way it was set up, that they didn't prove anything. And that's what Cruz is saying. He's stating the obvious. He's stating the obvious. But instead of pointing it at Trump, Ted Cruz could have gone, a couple layers deep and said, well, Rudy Giuliani didn't do a very good job presenting the case. And based on, what other people found, there clearly was election fraud. Based on what other people found. But he didn't do that. And this is one thing that Democrats never do. They never turn on their own in public. Not in public. They may eat their own in private. And you may see sort of the apparatchik of the Democratic Party, media people, they might eat their own. But they don't do that. And the Republicans do. The Republicans will fucking stab each other in the back. They don't care. There's no real solidarity. And Ted Cruz, and by the way, Trump completely humiliated him in the debates, and I would understand why. Ted Cruz would basically say, fuck you. You basically said my father was involved in the JFK assassination, which he likely was, by the way. And that really derailed Ted Cruz's chances at the presidency. By the way, I don't think Ted Cruz could have beaten Hillary Clinton, fairly or unfairly. Trump is the only person that was going to be able to do that. So the knives, man. It's the night of long knives for DJT. That's not really what I wanted to show you. It just came up. All right. Where is it? Oh, this is great. This is totally great. I do want to play some of this. Today is Civil Disobedience Day. Don't wear the mask. That's where the revolution is now. It's on the mask front. It is on the mask front. Okay. Where do I want to go? There was something that was really pertinent. Fuck. That I wanted to bring up. All right. Why don't I make a transition here? Oh, yeah. What was it? It was. Yeah. So Trump, apparently, this is the next piece of this. Okay. So Trump apparently has had to hire lawyers for the second impeachment. And apparently, this is what I wanted to find right here. Yeah, right there. Right there. So let me cue this up. So Trump has had to hire 2 new lawyers for the impeachment, which apparently is still on. And the lawyers he's hired are actually lawyers that have sued him in the past. Yeah, here we go. So let me make sure. Do I have this here? That's a different story I got to get to. That has to do with what's going on in England with the coronavirus. Testing. Door-to-door testing. Okay. So I want to put this on the screen just so I can wrap this piece around. Well, I got one more piece to deal with here around Trump and legal teams and these fucking lawyers. And then we'll get into silver. And then we'll get into the tragedy in Sacramento, which I don't really want to cover, but I'm going to because I think it's important for better or worse. All right, let me do a screen share here. Okay, so this is what's happening now. This is from the dailymail.com and February 1st. So Trump reveals new impeachment team, including lawyer who met with Jeffrey Epstein before his death and DA who refused to prosecute Bill Cosby. The former president called David Schoen and Bruce Castor highly respected trial lawyers. He said they agreed with him that his impeachment is unconstitutional. David Schoen met Jeffrey Epstein days before The financier died in jail in 2019, which we know he didn't. Schoen said Epstein was upbeat and asked Schoen to take on his defense. The Georgia-based lawyer does not believe that Epstein killed himself. We would agree on that. I'm sure Trump knows plenty about that. He just has to talk to Bill Barr. Bruce Castor was a district attorney for Montgomery County, PA. From 2000 to 2008, Castor declined to prosecute Bill Cosby for sexual assault. He told accuser Andrea Constand her case would be unlikely to get a conviction. Castor's successor successfully prosecuted Cosby in 2018, and he is in prison. Trump's legal shakeup came as Melania's parents were seen at Mar-a-Lago. So I guess Trump has got to defend himself again. There they are, his new legal team. David Schoen is based in Alabama. And there's Bruce Castor, another lawyer. And here's Melania's parents. Is he wearing a mask? Does he have a mask there? There they are at Mar-a-Lago, looking rather pensive. The Canalses became U.S. citizens in 2018 and are thought to be now living in Florida, like their daughter and son-in-law. Schoen, based in Atlanta, Georgia, with offices in New York and Alabama, is ready to defend Jeffrey Epstein when the New York financier was found dead in his cell. Right. So Butch Bowers and Deborah Barbier were expected to be lead attorneys for the impeachment case. Well, apparently not. Attorneys Greg Harris, Josh Howard, and Johnny Gasser have also reportedly left the scene. 45th President Donald J. Trump announces legal team. So I guess they're going to have an impeachment trial. In fact, 45 senators voted in agreement last week. So I guess this thing is on. And now Trump has to be defended. There's your Freemason, Bill Cosby, on his way to the pokey. There's that famous picture with Jeff Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, many of where Trump has been photographed with them. There he is looking like shit. Defense attorney says he doesn't believe Epstein killed himself. Okay, there we go. Schoen told Atlanta Jewish Times he became acquainted with Epstein about 11 years ago when the financier sought his advice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there you go. It's more legal bullshit, more just more defense, more legal defense that Trump is involved with. Now, how is this guy going to get back into office while he's essentially having to defend himself against the Senate in an impeachment trial? Like, let's do the math on this, people. Meanwhile, something much bigger is afoot. And I believe they're about ready to crash the system financially. This is why I believe they're beefing up on troops and security in Washington, D.C. Let me show you. Let me show you this. This is from today, and there are more National Guardsmen arriving in Washington, D.C. Check this out. as if they don't have enough. So what is really going on here? So here's what I think is happening. This activity with the Wall Street bets and the GameStop tards and now the silver tards, this is a calculated attack on the economy. This is what's going on. And again, I just keep talking about the French Revolution because you have these people that are being swept up in this frenzy. It's kind of like the tulip, sort of the tulip crisis, where tulips became this really insane commodity in Holland during the 1600s. Tulips were like really valued throughout Holland and other parts of Europe. And one tulip, one beautiful tulip, could net you like 100 pounds of cheese, and it was like the equivalent of $100,000 during in our economic scale. And there was a very interesting book that was written about that called The Madness of Crowds, and it was one of the first books on sort of this psychology of the crowd and what happens when there's this fever pitch amongst crowds, and these narratives take on a life of their own and almost become possessive in some ways. So we're starting to see some of that. And I think that this is aimed at this essentially just zeroing out the economy, because that's ultimately what they want to do, and they want to do it as quickly as possible. And I think the reason why all those troops are there is because when the shit hits the fan, that they want to be as absolutely and utterly protected as possible. That they're afraid that the hordes will descend upon Washington. This is the only thing that makes sense. The only thing that makes sense. I don't think they're there to lock those people in and to make mass arrests. I think that's a false narrative. That is an absolutely false narrative. And what's interesting is that now we're at a point where, let's say the silver rush is on and people are trying to, but if you buy SLVR, which is basically paper silver, you're actually helping. You're helping Citadel. Citadel has a major stake in silver. Citadel, by the way, owns Robinhood. They own Robinhood, and they owned, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Meyer. Was it? It was. Give me 1 second. Hold on. Yeah, so Citadel is the 5th largest owner of SLV. That's paper silver. Paper silver. Melvin. So Citadel had stakes in both Melvin, not Meyer, Melvin, which is the hedge fund, and they had a stake in Robinhood, which was the trading app. So they also are the 5th largest holder in paper silver. So in a lot of ways, they want people, they're manipulating people to help them with their short. Now, people could go out and try to buy as much physical silver as possible, and it may get up to $45 or $50 an ounce. I don't see it getting to $100 an ounce. But because they can manipulate the markets and they can manipulate the narrative of the markets, they could manipulate a crash. They can actually simulate a crash, in which case we are now firmly ensconced in the Great Reset. And remember, there are 2 dates that are worth noting: February 6th and February 14th. February 6th because of its connection with Adam Weishaupt, and that is theoretically the first day of being calendrically recorded in 70 AD in Pompeii. And amongst other things, it's a treaty day. And then February 14th, because of the dead giveaway in the movie Rollover at the beginning of the film. So we're in this period where, things aren't always what they appear to be or what they seem to be. Now, that said, there's also the unintended consequence of chaos, which once this chaos thing gets rolling, even the people that create the chaos have a hard time putting the genie back in the bottle. So would it be the worst thing at this point if the system's crashed and now we're having to deal face to face with the quote unquote Great Reset? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, because we're in uncharted territory. We're in completely uncharted territory. And, for me, I guess I'm pro chaos, because I think interesting things happen with chaos. Even when people who set out to create the chaos, they can't always control the chaos. So at the very least, it has creative potential. I'll tell you what doesn't have creative potential is now in England. This is for you, our fellow compatriots in the UK, many of whom watch this stream. Let me show you what's happening, or what will be happening in England. And I have a soft spot in my heart for England due to the fact that I have family there. I do. In Liverpool. Although I've never met them. Okay, so here we go. This is what's going on in England. Door-to-door mass testing in Surrey, Kent, London, Hertfordshire, Lancashire, and West Midlands after 11 people test positive for dangerous COVID South African variant, despite not leaving country and having no links to previous cases. So here we go. This is how they recreate the virus. Who knows how they're testing? It's kind of like the seasonal flu. Remember the seasonal flu? Like last year we had a flu, and this year we theoretically would have a new flu, but they wouldn't be the same flu, even though they would have a vaccine set up for the old flu, and they would use it for the new flu, and that vaccine wouldn't really work, although it made people sick, and they felt better about themselves, I guess, because they got the flu shot. So could this be another version of that kind of model? I would say probably has some possibility there. Right? Has some possibility. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just looking at the fact that there was a flu. Like there was a flu. We used to have the flu. And then the next year, there would be a different version of the flu. There was a version of COVID-19 last year, and now there's a new version of COVID-19. I'm asking questions, and I'm asking questions purposefully. I'm asking questions. These are rhetorical questions. Hint, hint. So this is really the bulk of the story here. Door-to-door coronavirus testing is being launched across 8 parts of England. Amid fears, the South African variant causing panic around the world is now spreading in the community. In a desperate attempt to keep track of the mutated virus that experts fear could hamper the current crop of vaccines, health officials will carry out swabs on doorsteps in Woking. I guess that's how you get woke, right? That's how you get woke. There's a woking, the great awakening. The great awakening is taking place in Surrey, Walsall in the West Midlands, as well as parts of London, Kent, Hertfordshire, and Lancashire. More than 80,000 people will be targeted as part of the surveillance scheme. They're calling it a surveillance scheme. And residents will be asked to take a test regardless of whether or not they have symptoms. Boy, they want that DNA, don't they? They want that potential for a positive test. The surge in testing will be done by, did they use like surge when it came to the deployment of troops in places like Afghanistan or Syria? Oh, we're going to have a surge. The surge in testing will be done by local health chiefs, along with Public Health England and the Department of Health and Social Care. Health officials are anxious not to let another COVID variant run rampant after Britain struggled to get a grip on the Kent strain, which sparked a devastating second wave that plunged that plunged England into its third lockdown. There are people that are in England. How devastating was it? How devastating was it? How many people do you know have died from the absolutely devastating South African strain that overtook Kent? I'd love to know how many people you know that have died from this devastating strain. How devastating has it been? I'm asking questions. I'm not here to posit answers, but I'm here to ask questions. Questions are apparently still theoretically allowed. And here's another question. Why is Boris Johnson now saying that, guess what, England? You're going to be locked down until summer. Do you think this is going away? No. Lockdown extended again. Now, number 10 Downing Street indicates restrictions to remain until summer. Look at this bozo. He's a total bozo. He's not wearing enough masks. He needs 3 more. The third national lockdown currently in place in England is set to be reviewed in the middle of the month, and legislation on the restrictions runs out at the end of March. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has previously indicated he thought the UK could return to some form of normality by Easter. No, they don't want you experiencing your holidays. Get it in your brain. Your holidays are canceled. They're canceled. Everything that's connected to a previous cultural continuum is canceled. They want to continue to do this until enough people pass away or are simply reprogrammed that they don't remember what the fuck Easter was or Christmas was or Thanksgiving was or Boxing Day was. Whatever those days were, they're not having any of it. They want a blank slate, a blank canvas for the Great Reset. He said the hope was by summer we will return to some sort of normality. To extend lockdown rules beyond the end of March would require the support of MPs. Just a fortnight ago, the Prime Minister said he remained optimistic things would look very different by spring. Oh, I'm sure they will. And in December, he said the UK would return to normal by Easter. Well, that's not true. Move the goalposts. And the plan on February 22nd will set out what we may be able to do in terms of reducing restrictions going forward. What we may be able to do. It's always mutable. It's always changeable. Look at this fucking world. This is a dystopic script that's unfolding before our very eyes. The deadly map. COVID cases appear to be flattening in the UK. But now, because even though they're flattening, you have to continue to move the fucking goalposts. That's how it's done, right? That's how it's done. Just keep doubling down, up in the ante, until ultimately people break. This is what they want. They want people to just psychologically, emotionally, financially just break. They want to take people to the breaking point and beyond. This is a collective trauma-based program, and I don't have any problem saying it. And your goal is to get through this. You're Michael Caine in the idiocracy file. That's who you are. You have to get through this. You have to. It's essential. Now, I'm going to show you what's being done in other places and what they're opting to do. But before I show you that, which is on a good note, by the way, and I do want to leave you on a good note because I have to go and you have to go, and we all have lives and we all have days and we all have things that we need to accomplish. And those things are important, by the way. Don't ever lose sight of that. But I need to show you what went down in Sacramento. And I alluded to this. This is not pretty, okay? This is not a pretty story. But it's also a story that the mainstream media will not report, and they will not report it in its entirety. And it really strikes to the heart of the fabric, the social fabric that has been frayed and has become undone in the pseudo-reality that was created over the summer with what happened with George Floyd and what happened with the so-called protests, which were a mass induction into cognitive dissonance. Mass. And now again, on the aftermath of all that, Derek Chauvin, the guy who supposedly choked George Floyd out, found innocent. So they dropped the third-degree murder charge against Chauvin. That was in October, 22nd of October. Okay, so my bad. He was not found innocent. I need to correct that. Instead, they dropped the third-degree murder charge. And he's going to be tried alone. Okay. Let me just see here. Hold on. So that's still going on. I apologize. So that was, I have to do a correction on that. Now the judge is seeking orders to look into Kelly Chauvin and Derek Chauvin's divorce. Okay. So there's going to be no murder charge here. That part has already come out. But it is still a case of mass cognitive dissonance. All right, let me, okay, I just needed to be sure because I got to be clear about what I'm sharing with you. So I'm going to talk about what happened in Sacramento. And I'm sorry that I have to bring this up, but I think it's important. Where are we? Okay. So this is from KCRA, and I guess this is Vacaville. So it's not Sacramento. It's Vacaville, where they used to have Agnew State Hospital, which was one of the Hold on. So here we go. Which was one of the largest asylums, mental hospitals in California. Was, not anymore. Okay, here we go.
Now, Walter, this extremely disturbing incident happened, or at least police responded to that incident around 12:42 a.m. in the overnight hours. We want to give you a look at what that apartment looks like.
Okay, so keep in mind that the subhead or the header here is two women found dead after saying two women. Keep that in mind, okay? Two women.
Like right now, you can see that the windows on the back side of the apartment where the suspect had barricaded himself, those windows are completely blown out. The grass, or rather the glass, still crackling there. Now, Vacaville police responded to a welfare check call at Rocky Hills Veterans Apartment here, and a woman called to report that a man was inside that apartment, possibly armed, and we later found that TCRA3, we found that video of a man live streaming himself on Instagram. I watched it myself, Walter. It is too graphic to show on live television, but in the video you could see two unconscious women. They appeared to be very badly beaten and bloody as well, unconscious. And in terms of what we know about the suspect, we know he is 29 years old, from Santa Rosa, and is wanted for felonies including domestic battery, assault with a deadly weapon. Now, when officers did arrive on scene, the suspect barricaded himself inside that apartment. A SWAT team was deployed, and negotiations with the suspect were unsuccessful. The entire complex here in Vacaville was evacuated, and we're told that gas was deployed to try and get the suspect to emerge from inside the apartment. Now, eventually, officers did enter. They found the suspect inside. They apprehended him using a taser, and the man was taken into custody at around 8:30 a.m. this morning. The two women who were seen on the live stream, they were found dead inside the apartment, and their cause of death is under investigation, and their families are now being notified. Now, a neighbor did tell me that, because we spoke to a number of neighbors here, a neighbor told me that he had seen the suspect around the complex before, but that the man had largely kept to himself. Investigators are continuing to look into a possible motive and the reason behind why the suspect in that live stream was in this apartment in the first place with those two women. And we have a call out to Vacaville police for more information. Reporting from Vacaville, Stephanie.
So here's the suspect right here. Raymond Michael Weber. So let me tell you what happened. This guy had a threesome. Okay, he had a threesome, and at the end of the threesome, he killed the two women, and he was live streaming this on Instagram. Now, I use the word women loosely. This is one of the women. She's 15 years old. There's a sickness and there's a dark spell that has befallen our planet. And it is not COVID-19. And when you see something like that, it's very hard to unsee it. And I debated whether I wanted to show it or not. But we have to understand on some level what we're really dealing with here. And we're in a spiritual war. We're in a spiritual war. And everything that was done over the summer was part of a darker occult operation. It wasn't just to create mayhem in the cities. It wasn't just to burn down certain parts of cities that would be rebought, aka disaster capitalism for pennies on the dollar. Although those things were all part of it. Ultimately, it was part of an occult operation that unleashed a spirit into this world that has gone unchecked. And that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. And the two women who are really young women, minors, they're caught up in the spell too. They are caught up in the spell as well. And I'm not blaming the victims here. I'm certainly not blaming the victims. But if you're 15 years old, which is apparently what they were, at least one of them was, and you're in a situation like that, you're not using really good judgment. And you probably haven't used good judgment for a while. And you probably haven't had a lot of spiritual and emotional and psychological support. But in some ways, this is what the culture has created, or the lack of a culture has created. It's created essentially a zombie culture. And it's unfortunate. I mean, those two girls never had a chance. And, it'll be one of those stories that would just shuffle away. The mainstream media won't pay any attention to it. Right. But I wanted to just bring it up because, again, it really is a symbol of the times. And it's a symbol of this end of this era that we're in. And these are not happy or positive. They're not happy or positive times at that level. It's just not. There are other things that are interesting. There are other things that are going to take root, and we're going to get through this, and we're going to ultimately overcome this bullshit. But it's not going to be easy. And I'm just showing you, what you're up against and what we're up against. We're up against the madness of Boris Johnson. We're up against the madness that was unleashed over the summer, which has still not been put back into the bottle. The gin has not been put back into the bottle. And now we're looking at this, whatever's going to be happening with the silver stuff. And who knows where they sort of move the herd with this financial plague of locusts, which, again, it may actually be a good thing. In the end, it may be a good thing. Because the way that this system is set up, it can't continue. It just can't continue. Now, can you do something else, a pocket resistance, or set up alternate currencies? Yes, all those things can happen. You can do that. Those are potential answers to the ills and the crisis that we're currently undergoing. But in order to do that, you need to separate yourself out from the dominant paradigm, and you need to create something completely new. Completely new. You could use pieces of the old world, which could be helpful. So let me show you something positive. Yeah, it was so bad. Before I go into something positive, this thing was so bad that Twitter, by the way, Twitter is incredibly selective about what they'll promote. And we know that. But they took this video down. So apparently this guy, Uzi Marcus, is a rapper, and it was his brother. Well, I don't blame Twitter for taking it down. Okay, so let's get to something positive, shall we? Kids marching on the Michigan State Capitol, demanding the return of high school sports. See, this is, again, we're into the collective. We're into the spirit of Aquarius. Talked about this last night. Saturn, Jupiter, the conjunction. Here we go. The collective. Jupiter, Aquarius. Expanding, right? What do they want to do? They want to play. They want to play. So this is from Lansing, Michigan. You're not going to hear about this. So this was probably organic. This is not AstroTurf. Here, let me go back in and let me do a little audio here on this one. So let's hear it.
Louder. Come on, I need to hear everybody real loud. Hey, is anybody?
Explanation. It is the dream of all our athletes to succeed. It is about giving our kids good, wholesome opportunities for a lifetime of success. I end today by repeating my call from last August. Governor Whitmer, please open the ticket booths.
Please open. You don't cheap. Like she's going to respond to politeness. Okay, here we go.
Let the bands perform. Let the cheerleaders lead. And let our Michigan athletes play the game that will return community pride, spirit, and the excitement to our neighborhoods. Let them play.
Louder. Come on, I need to hear everybody.
So you're going to see more of this. And in Italy, they're doing something very similar. Let's see if I can find this thing. So here we go. In Italy, they're opening their restaurants. In France, they don't give a shit. They're doing the same thing. Let me show you. So in Italy, they're saying, fuck it. We're going to open our restaurants. We don't care. They're in full revolt. This is a culture that loves food and they love getting together. And France is right behind them. And I think today is like what, National Open Up Day or something like that. So, we are in the midst of a truly epic period of time, right? A truly epic period of time. And it's just like the opening of Tale of the Two Cities. Is the worst of times and is the best of times. And we're going to see the worst, the absolute worst of the decomposed and possessed human spirit. And we're going to see the best of the human spirit that wants to break free from the chains of any kind of tyranny and any kind of oppression. The key to all this is to understand where you're being led throughout this. That's really, really important, right? It's very important to be discerning about who the Pied Piper is and what the Pied Piper's intention can be, as they know that there are people who are just absolutely bursting at the seams for liberation. So just pay attention and be discerning with that stuff. That's important. The thing in Michigan, that doesn't seem astroturfed at all. The spontaneous openings of restaurants in Italy, all across Italy, doesn't seem astroturfed at all. I saw a video where there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cars on the Autobahn in Germany, not astroturfed at all. This is the response of the human spirit, the divine spirit inside of humanity that understands that it's being caged in and boxed in and put inside that Saturnian cube, right? The hypercube. So at the end of the day, there is hope, okay? So don't think that there isn't hope. And we're in uncharted territory, and we really theoretically don't have anybody that's going to come to the rescue. Trump is not going to come to the rescue. I'm sorry to tell you that. Alan Dershowitz is too busy promoting Jared Kushner and his buddies for a fucking Nobel Peace Prize, okay? That's what they're doing. That is what they're doing. That's true, by the way. Alan Dershowitz has nominated Jared Kushner and Avi Berkowitz for their great work that they did in the Middle fucking East for a Nobel Peace Prize. They will step in and they will take care of and they will support their efforts and their achievements. But they will not really do it for the rest of us. And I'm talking about elitists. That's what I'm talking about. Because they're elitists. They won't do it for the rest of us. They don't give a shit about the plebes. You know? And Jared Kushner, he'll get a Nobel Peace Prize, just like how he got into, what was it? Was it Harvard? He was a subpar student, and his father basically bought his admission to Harvard. And he was a guy who had his foot on the brakes inside the Trump administration, and he's going to have the same thing happen by getting his Nobel, theoretically. He'll probably get it. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets it at all. Oh, think of all the wonderful things Alan Dershowitz and his great legal mind could have done for Donald John Trump. You notice he steered as far away from that train wreck and shit show as possible. So be on your toes. Situational awareness at all times. It's very important. Very, very important. We will get through this. And the landscape, the social landscape is going to continue to deconstruct. That's the way it is. We'll be dealing with more chaos. That's the way it is. Some of the chaos will be bad. Some of the chaos will be good. Some of it will be negative. Some of it will be positive. And we'll have to sort through the wreckage here of the postmodern landscape, the time beyond time. Okay? Hang in there. Put on your big girl boots, your big boy boots. This is, you know, we're into adult territory now. And you can do it. It can be done. And I know there are a lot of you who are and have been struggling to just even deal with the psychological ramifications of all this stuff. You got through a year of it. Okay. Congratulations. And you'll get through another year of it. And you'll get wiser, and you'll get harder, and you'll get tougher, and you'll get smarter. And hopefully that won't be at the expense of staying open with your spirit. Okay. All right. Thanks for being here. Kind of a long show. Let's see what we have here in terms of comments. I can't really see the comments. I'd have to go into the void. It's kind of too late for that. All right. Let me do a bye for now. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Take good care. Thank you for all your support. I'm feeling significantly better. And onward we go. Have a good day.